I call this musical intro air conditioning unit and Russ. And
It's
it's
a,
going to be on my new record, releasing Never.
it sounds like it's buried or it's muffled.
Yeah, well, went way down in the octaves because you like
Mm.
the really low stuff, and I haven't figured out how to. I have like 30 keys, maybe less on the thing I'm using, which I'm still not going to say what is. And
I
then
I think it's a MIDI.
it's not a MIDI controller. The software is all totally on board the device.
Mm.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about how you learn stuff.
Yeah.
So how would you, this is a good example, like a MIDI controller. I'm gonna give one sentence of what a MIDI controller is and tell me if I get this right. A MIDI controller is a series of hardware or software buttons which send commands, which are, codes, M01 through whatever, and those codes correspond in a piece of software, music software generally, to a note or a sound or a setting or something else. So if I have a button machine and I want to control a bunch of different things, one at a time or all together, I use MIDI as the encoding of the signal coming from the hardware buttons to the software. Is that
Yeah.
doing it justice?
Yeah. It's a way to, um, if you know notes on a keyboard, it's a way to use that to create a bunch of different instrument sounds.
How did you
And
learn? How did you learn it?
I haven't. I, I just I just know what it is.
But how do you just know? Was there a minute when you sat down and said, "I need to understand what a MIDI device is. Let me Google what is MIDI."
Yeah, no. Just having been in the studio a bunch of times, recording studio, making records, is a lot of that information comes. Again, I think it's what we talked about yesterday, and we'll talk more about specific intentional learning in a second. But I think if your eyes are open, figuratively, I guess literally, but if your eyes are open and you're curious, you're always learning. And I think the MIDI controller is an example of that for me because I'd be in the studio and I'd be like, one of the first couple times, and I have no shame. I think that's part of it too.
Here, let me
Seasons.
doodle this.
Yes. Well, or hey man, how are you making all those sounds with that little keyboard? And I'll get the sarcastic, condescending explanation from the veteran studio engineer, but I know what it is from that point on. So I think there things like that where it's opportunistic learning, and I'm the master of that.
My plan is to hold your feet to the fire because in a yes and kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that can possibly be enough. At some point, you can't just be an information sponge. You have to have specific techniques of that factoid I didn't know, or I didn't know how to do break a board with my hand, which I know how to do, by the way.
This has to be demoed on air at some point.
There's nothing to it. You pick a board that's not too big. You fudge it by reading the
Like
grain of the
pre-cut it.
board. No, you don't have to pre-cut it, but you just we're talking about you know that like a 3/4 inch to an inch, not huge. And if you have it along the grain of the wood, like wood is not that strong to a direct impact. So the trick is you have to like shock the wood basically. So it's not really a matter of how much. It's not how hard you punch per se, but it's also just you gotta get in there quick and make sure that as you're punching, all the energy goes into the punch, not into, I don't know, some other thing. So it's easy. I could teach you how to do it. But if you just stand there and start punching at wood, which is I feel like somebody who decides that they're going to become a martial arts expert, they would never say punching at wood.
Yeah.
So if you're going to
So
stand there punching at wood versus I'm going to say, no, Terry, move your feet this way, square your shoulders like this. The follow through should go into this point. I'm teaching you how to break a board. There
You
has to
had
be something that as an adult you have been explicitly taught or self-taught in that way.
for sure.
So tell me.
So um, I'll give you the punchline first. It, a lot of that type of learning that you're asking me about and you're explaining is just it's cramming it through. It's just brute force. It's a commitment to doing it for me. So I started. I was a pre-med undergrad and went several years of just sort of working, and then realized about 10 years ago that the exactly 10 years ago that I needed to do something different. So I applied to and got accepted a graduate program in data science. And I could barely spell code. I'd never written code. I had a course in college, a sociology course where we used SPSS, which is an IBM statistical science package. And that's not really coding. It's kind of hard to explain. So I didn't know. I didn't even know what Python was, literally. I didn't know what R was. I knew what SQL was just because I did. And so I got in this graduate program, which the reason for being for this program is to write code and learn the best practices of data science to, manipulate data sets and gain insights. So in an 18-month period, this was meant to be a 3-year program, by the way. I was working full time, being a father, blah, blah, blah. So a 3-year program I completed in 18 months, taught myself to write code in Python, in R, in SQL, and in SAS. SAS, coincidentally, was my favorite syntax, but all of those languages, because each course would be set in a different language, and some more advanced than others, and some, like the core course load, built progressively on the language. So how did I learn that? A whole lot of brute force, of just making mistakes, Googling the errors that I would be thrown from the environment that I was working in, and then having that take me to Stack Overflow or some blog where somebody explains why that error happened and how to resolve it. And I sort of learned about object-oriented programming and things along because we didn't learn the theory of that. I don't know that any course ever teaches that. So for me, it was just full immersion, brute force into, I have to learn this language to learn to get this degree, to learn the things necessary to earn this degree, which I'm committed to doing. So I just forced myself to do it, and it was a lot of again, brute force, Googling, seeking out help from, whether it be virtually or in person, from folks who were good at it. And, coincidentally, what I found, and this is my last point, what I found is even seasoned programmers at that time, even seasoned programmers, folks who spent a lot of time writing code, did a whole lot of Googling error messages and using Stack Overflow. Like, I thought I was deficient or I was a novice and I would never get the hang of it, because I still, granted, it's been a while since I've been at it, but I would still use that method. I've got this error. What am I doing wrong? And look it up. So it was a lot of, obviously, knowing where to look for external sources that were solving a specific problem that I had. So I pieced it together, but sort of holistically, it's just brute force for me. Learning to program in a number of different languages over a short time period, while also learning the best practices of data science, was just force. It was a lot of time, a commitment to doing it, and discipline.
And so, I mean, we know what your day looks like. I assume it was broadly similar then. You wake up,
Oh, it was way
you
worse.
exercise, you go to work, you have class, you do your homework, you go to sleep, rinse and repeat.
I don't want to I don't want to oversell it, or belabor it or bemoan it. It was hands down, unequivocally, the most stressful time period of my entire life. I would wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't even think about after lunch. I would just be like, what do I need to do until 8 o'clock? What do I need to do until 11 o'clock? And it was that until midnight. I slept very little during that time period because I'd come back from a full day of work and then right right to class, like right to coursework, and do that until midnight while also trying to be a dad and other things. So it was not a fun time. And again, that's why I say there's a certain, maybe this varies across what it is that's attempting to be learned, and maybe my situation was a little unique, but I think at a certain point, to learn effectively, there's just a certain amount of brute force associated with that, like a commitment to doing it. There are techniques and things, and I want to talk about the importance of sleep and learning in a minute. But I think there are techniques and things that a person can use to enhance the productivity of learning. But I think at a certain point, it's just brute force. It's discipline.
So decide the commitment to, I'm going to take a course, and I know that that course is 18 months long, and I refuse to fail at the course. This is what I'm going to do. The hard part of actually executing that was almost an afterthought, in the sense that you've decided what you're going to do, and maybe it was harder and more stressful than you thought it would be, but you're going to do that because you want to be able at the end of 18 months to look back and say, now I can look for a job in a different field with these qualifications that I have and the skill set that I now have. You bucketed your upskilling to an 18-month block, and you're like, I want to come out of this with a skill that I didn't have when I went into it. But that was 10 years ago. Have you done anything? Have you gained any skills since through any means other than osmosis?
Yeah. We've talked about transcendental meditation before, so that.
When
And
did
I
you
think
start that? 7 years ago?
um,
You
8,
told you told me.
yeah,
I,
7.
I feel like, honestly, I feel like 7. If it was 8, I feel like I did an okay job of that.
You did, because when I told you that in the year 2023, it was 7 years ago.
I need to tell you another thing. I practiced the skill of transcendental meditation, but at that, there was not a single 2-day stretch where I did what I said I would do.
I didn't think there would be,
I said
or
I would do. I said I would do it twice a day for 20 minutes for 3 months, and I think I made it twice a day, one day, and then I went to twice a day some of the days, and within a week, I was like, there might be a light at the end of this tunnel, but I might have been overcommitted, having said that I would try this twice a day for 20 minutes for 3 months straight.
yeah, you just explained the other side of the coin of what we were just talking about with the commitment to learning, is that brute force in the equation that is acquisition of something beneficial, whether that's a skill or a fact or a new bit of knowledge. On the left side of that equation is always effort and discipline, and commitment might be the biggest variable on the left side of that equation. And that's the one I think that's the hardest to get. Regardless of what the carrot is at the end of the stick, or as you said, the light at the end of the tunnel, you have to really be you can't miss on the effort, the commitment, the dedication part. Like whether the enticement from the potential payoff or reward is significant enough for the individual is probably crucial, as you just explained. But I think we talk about a lot of things, and I think on that effort and commitment and discipline and dedication piece is such a crucial variable.
Do you know where I think it fell down? Other than having committed to a daily podcast and simultaneously a new 40-minute a day meditation habit. Besides that, where it fell down, I think it was. I don't. I spend a lot of time clearing my headspace
Mm,
in my day. It's not particularly structured, and it's definitely not sit down for 20 minutes 2 times and clear my head. But I have lots of time where my thoughts are on their own, and I'm not like there's not a lot of stimulus coming in. Um, it's a variety of different things, but I think that the impression I was getting in my extremely extensive practice practice of attempting meditation was this will clear my head more than it currently is, but clear head is not that's not a weak link in my chain at the moment. I mean, so uh things like physical fitness, more of a weak link; diet, more of a weak link; uh financial attainment, more of a weak link. And those things were a bigger issue than clear headspace. Even dumb stuff like how is my schedule going to be the same, most days while also managing the family and the household? How am I going to keep to what? Like I have this thing in my mind where I used to have this rigorous schedule. I keep getting interrupted on the rigorous schedule. How do I accept a certain amount of disruption to the schedule and still be able to power through on things that are important daily habits? So I think all of that is just to say I'm with you 100% on learning by osmosis. I also feel like for an adult who is a lifelong learner, you have to have these chunks where you commit to the skill building,
yeah.
not to the learning conceptually. So counter example to meditation, I have gained skills for the purpose of learning how to podcast on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And those, to your point about it feeling like you're basically just a knowledge sponge and you just get it through the context of what you're doing and you're on board conceptually and the rest of it, it's just a follow through step. Like knowing how to use this software to make a podcast, or knowing how to use a microphone, or knowing how to use the interface, or knowing how to use the video tools, all of that stuff. I think nothing about it as far as setting down and making that a skill. However, it was, I had a thing I wanted to do. So then in service of that thing, I had to learn those skills because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do the thing. I learned how to make websites that way. It was like, I want to be able to make a website. So in order to be able to make a website, step one, I don't know, Google it. Step two, make a website. Step three, make a better website. 10 years down the road, charge somebody to make a website for them. That's it. That's the whole process. But the steps of what button do I click where to make a website it's so uninteresting as to be trivial. Is that what you're trying to get at here?
I think we talk about it 100%. That was all very well said. I think we talk about a lot of things, and I don't know how to quantify this as a paradigm or a framework, nor do I have interest in doing it. But we talk about a lot of things where this is the methodology. I want to do this thing. What do I need to do this thing?
Yeah.
And I don't care what you call it. I don't care that Tony Robbins writes a book about it. I don't care that it's been studied in psychology classes or can be defined. Maybe somebody needs that, but I think that is the methodology. Here's this thing. Do I have the effort? Do I want to do the things necessary for me to do this thing?
Right.
And that's it. You just explained it, and I think we talk about a lot of things where that's the framework.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I I want to know. I want to know, is there a way, did you consciously move away from, all right, I'm going to do my book learning and my school learning, and I'm going to sign up for this course? Is it functionally different to have big chunk of structured time to learn with a syllabus? Like, is that meaningfully different? And did you get there to the different way intentionally, or did you kind of just like, I've done that thing, so now I'm going to go back to my, you know, my continual learning as opposed to my 18-month block?
Oh man, such a good question. And maybe we can jump off here for a little bit.
Yeah,
So
please.
I want to be fluent in Spanish.
Yes.
And we've had this discussion before.
Yeah, but
And
we can get specific about it now because this is going to lead to a bunch of follow-up questions, but go ahead.
yeah, well, I'm looking, we talk about public learning is the reason why we did this. So I'm looking to learn here. I want to be fluent in Spanish. I think ultimately that means immersion in a Spanish culture for X increment of time, whatever that is. I don't know.
You
And
mean
it's
in order to learn that?
in order to be fluent with Spanish. Like
So this was a problem for me. I at some point I also decided I want to learn Spanish, and then I ran into some difficulty literal years later because I hadn't specified the goal clearly enough. And it took me years of practicing Spanish every day, a little bit, to understand that I had set a goal that was never going to work, because learn Spanish is not a goal,
yeah,
and achieve fluency is actually that even that can be
it's not a
quantified
goal
more,
either.
right?
Yeah.
So
Like
you
I
can
want define it, quantify it.
so
What is
you have
fluency?
so there, and I actually don't know the definitions of fluency, but there is an international standard for language fluency that applies to all languages. Are you aware of this already?
I'm not.
So you have like level. I'm not going to talk out of my butt about this, but the point is, you can get to a accepted criteria for level one, level two, level three fluency, and there are native speakers who may not check all the boxes of all of those things in any language. So you can actually narrow down your I want to be fluent in Spanish, and you can get even more specific and say I want to be able to pass test XYZ administered to the international standard this, and then say I will now have this level of fluency. And on one hand that seems a little bit corny, because you don't want to learn Spanish for the sake of passing a test. You want to learn Spanish for the sake of being conversant in Spanish.
Right.
But having the shorthand of I know I am able to pass exam level blah 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 is effective at saying I will be able to go and have a vacation in Spain and be able to function in all walks of daily life, or I will be able to have a business in Mexico and it will not be a major obstacle that I don't speak enough of the language.
So
And yeah,
that's my goal.
right.
I want to be I want to hypothetically be able to do the job that I do now
Yeah.
in a Spanish only country.
Has that
What
goal changed at all over time for you, or is
oh,
it the
yeah,
same goal it was at the beginning?
that's just what I came up with right now.
so, so in the last 30 seconds, your goal
Correct.
changed.
Correct. Based on new information,
Yeah.
based on learning from you intentionally that there are international standards for fluency in a language. That's depressing
Why is that depressing?
because I'll never meet that. Well, I could, but what has to come off the list?
Uh, I think that's the wrong way of approaching it.
Okay.
Um, because the test is, so if you think of it as learning to the test, then yeah, that's depressing because you know won't make it or whatever. But if instead you're just seeing it as you are like you're just, all it is a measure of what you already know. So the SAT, for example, you could prep for it a little bit, but the SAT and the ACT, these are tests designed to measure what you know, or your aptitude, right? So the language test is not there. There's a score for all of the levels. So if you're an intermediate beginner, okay, I'm an intermediate beginner. I know I'm an intermediate beginner because I passed the intermediate beginner class. If I'm advanced beginner, I had to know a bunch of other stuff. If I'm advanced, then yeah. So treating the test as this is a thing to achieve is less useful than treating the test as this is a measure of my progress so far.
So how do you do the left side of the equation to earn the achievement of passing the test at whatever level you're
Left
getting?
side being the inputs
Yeah,
to get better.
what are the inputs to passing beginner, intermediate, and advanced fluency?
See, now I'm not a master of learning science. I actually know almost nothing about learning science, but it seems to me that learning, the blend of skills and knowledge and abilities and facts it applies across the board. So for Spanish, you need to have vocabulary, you need to be able to read, you need to read a lot of stuff, you need to be able to speak, and you need to be able to listen and hear. So the the left side for learning a foreign language is each of those pieces can be managed together. They can be managed independently. If you really love reading books, then go read the books, and your reading comprehension will be higher than your speaking or your listening comprehension. If you really, really, really want to be doing business in a face-to-face way, you just need to find Spanish speakers and speak Spanish every day with them. And it needs to be varied enough that you're actually picking it up, and you need to have the practice with them to where your mouth is able to say the right stuff, your brain and your ears are used to hearing it. And then it's repetition. Just do it all the time, flashcards and all the other stuff. But that's never going to be, the flashcards will never get you to fluency, because fluency depends on the ebbs and flows of conversation and context and all the other stuff that makes it possible for us to be conversant, which neither of us would be able to do in any other language right now.
Mm-mm. No, I could, and I do on occasion stammer and work my way to it. I did. Yeah, there are, but that's a desire. I want to be fluent. So I have to, I've done this in a number of different areas. I have to figure out, and I feel the internal deadline. I have to figure out what I need to do to become fluent. I want to be more than just can order food in a restaurant fluent in Spanish. I want it to be a second language. I would like to be able to, whatever the equivalent is to TOEFL, maybe that's what you're referencing. English as a second language,
Mm-hmm.
TOEFL. A lot of, foreign people have to take or prove proficiency on that test. Whatever
Yeah.
the equivalent is to that, I'd like to be able to do that in Spanish.
All right. So Spanish you're learning. And
Yeah,
how many, you're spending a lot of time on Spanish each day, right?
half
Or each week.
15 to 30 minutes a day.
And how much change is there to that routine?
Yes. None.
Yeah.
But I know also that what I'm doing is just to maintain what I had. If I stop doing even that 15 to 30 minutes of Duolingo, then I would lose, because it helps keep vocabulary, if nothing else, and verb conjugation a little bit, which I think are important. But I don't think that these are going to be key inputs for me to become fluent. I think it's just for me to not lose what I've gained knowledge-wise to this point. I've
I'm
got
gonna
to do
say,
something different.
I'm gonna say something ageist. I feel that understanding the nuance of maintenance versus growth and expansion, and knowing that you have to practice with intention, and then also knowing that you need some sort of cheat code, like go live in Spain for 6 months.
Yeah.
That is stuff that I feel like comes with age and wisdom, because I didn't understand it when I was young and dumb. But also looking back, there are people that are 21 and have already figured that out.
Yeah. Well, because probably they've had someone who has been influential in their life that has gotten through with this explanation and it resonated. I didn't have that for a large chunk of my life. So a lot of these things were just figuring out by trial and error. And I think that's most people's experience. I don't think I'm unique in that
My
sense.
parents were very aggressive about go take a course, go get a training, stay in school, you know, learn the skills through quote unquote proper channels. There was very, very little discussion about like live the skill.
That's a big point of Talib's. We used to talk about him a lot. We haven't in quite some time, but that's a big point of his too, is you don't learn a language by taking university courses. You learn a language by living in the country and having to order and interact with people. He said that's how you learn a language.
And being able to carry what you know with what you don't know yet in tandem, and not be too stressed out about what you don't know. Same thing for learning music, right? If you
Yeah.
the I remember starting to play out with people again after a long break, and there were a bunch of beginners, a few experts, no like full blown masters or anything like that, and the middle was people that were mostly comfortable-ish playing with others, not necessarily strangers in a drop-in environment. And each person, no matter their skill level, had something about that drop-in jam situation that they were uncomfortable with. And if you talked to each person, no matter how good they were, no matter where they were in the hierarchy, all of them had a thing that was either brand new to them or that was, not comfortable for them. So like if we were playing a pickup blues jam thing, the one drummer who I thought was doing fine and like sounded pretty good and sounded comfortable and everything, he was like, "Oh, I actually play thrash metal. I really never play this kind of music." And
I love it.
I'm like, well, I guess that makes me feel a lot better about, I haven't done this in a long time and I haven't done this exact thing maybe ever. Um, so that was a very specific piece of learning where I thought I was the one that didn't know the stuff. And then as I talked to everybody else, this was over weeks and weeks and weeks of more or less the same people coming back together. And it became very apparent that everybody was still picking up new stuff and learning. And that was a lot different than what you describe as how did you learn MIDI? You get, somebody giving you a smart alecky response about how do you not know this? It was basically as soon as you ask somebody like what their comfort level is or what's new for them or how they feel, like how they feel about this thing we're doing, or you open up and be like, man, I really don't know how any of these knobs and buttons work. If you can be kind of open to the explanation, people love talking about, whatever thing they're struggling with or trying to learn or whatever else.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that you're going to get somebody that if you come to them and they're like, man, I'm really struggling with the blues drums, but hey, I'm having fun, right? They're not going to be like, how do you not know the blues drums? Anybody knows the blues drums. And then it turns out nobody likes that person, so they don't get invited back. Not the one who doesn't know the blues drums, the one who questions why so and so doesn't know the blues drums.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's an example of that from this week, like a flavor of that. We did a couple of songs at a tribute show on New Year's Day for my favorite all-time performer or artist, Townes Van Zandt. Mm-hmm. Every New Year's Day, it's like a 20-year thing here in Louisville now. His family used to come to it, but mm-hmm. there's a tribute where a bunch of local or Kentucky musicians, Indiana musicians play Townes Van Zandt songs, and a lot of like OG Louisville musicians play in this thing, like session players, really talented players. And this doesn't bother me at all because I know my limitations, but my guitar player, and I guess my bassist too, were both like really, really nervous about doing this because in fact, the comment was made, man, I'm comfortable with my skill and my ability, but there are a lot of real players in this room. I'm like, why do you do you play your thing? Like it doesn't matter.
It matters to a degree, but your attitude matters more up to a point. And you're going to be more respected if you can sort of gracefully come to agreement with somebody else that if you are genuinely not good enough and you're not good enough and they know you're not good enough and everybody can have that conversation in a way that's not really like intentionally mean-spirited, that's a lot better than, you stink, get off the stage, which isn't really good for anybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to go learn some stuff today and I'll come back tomorrow with what I learned. I'm going to see what I can learn in a 24-hour period. And I'm going to talk about how I did it.
Sounds good.
And maybe it's going to be a Townes Van Zandt number. Talk to you tomorrow after some learning, Terry.
Have a good day. Thanks, man. Take care.